Hey guys, tonight we're drifting back to a time when the only thing between you and the endless sky was a blanket of stars, and the wind whispered stories across the vast steppes. You're sitting by a crackling fire, the flames flickering low as the scent of scorched leather and horse sweat clings to the air. The moon hangs like a shy spectator, casting a pale glow over the dust and the distant silhouettes of horses tethered in a loose circle. Out here, there's no quick snack from the fridge, no microwave hum, no Uber Eats on standby. Just you, a horse, and whatever you could wrangle together under the open sky. And honestly, you wouldn't last a day out here. Really, you wouldn't. Because have you ever tried cooking a meal while galloping across a freezing plain? Yeah, good luck with that. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is. I love seeing how far these sleepy tales travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shift in the saddle, feeling the worn leather creak beneath you. The chill of the night seeps in, and the wind seems to find every gap in your layers, pricking your skin with cold fingers. The horses snort softly, steam rising from their nostrils in the moonlight. You watch as a rider ahead adjusts his blanket, tucking it tighter around his shoulders, the ends flapping like tired wings. The Mongolian steppe is both beautiful and brutal, an endless ocean of grass that stretches in every direction. It feels like standing on the edge of the world, with nothing but the wind and your own heartbeat for company. You hear the soft jingle of a bridle, the distant whinny of a restless horse, and the low murmur of voices around the fire. Someone sharpening a knife, its edge gleaming as it catches the firelight. And then you notice it, a small pot bubbling over a meager flame. It's wedged into a ring of stones, the fire barely more than glowing embers. You squint, curious. What could they possibly be cooking out here, miles from any kitchen, any market, any village? The answer drifts to you on the breeze. Mutton stew, rich with fat and a hint of salt. Your stomach growls, and you imagine how that must taste after a long day of riding, the wind chafing your face and your legs aching from the saddle. But here's the thing, those Mongol riders didn't always need a fire. Nope, sometimes they just let the heat of their horses do the cooking for them. Yeah, you heard that right. Imagine strapping a slab of meat inside your saddlebag and letting it bounce around while you ride. By the end of the day, it's tenderized, slightly warm, and infused with the scent of leather and horse sweat. Not exactly five-star dining, but hey, it worked. And just so you know, historians still debate whether this was an actual cooking technique or just a survival story passed down from weary riders. Some claim they stuffed raw meat inside saddlebags to soften it while on the move. Others argue that it was more myth than menu. Either way, it paints a picture, doesn't it? A rider bouncing along, his dinner marinating in horse heat. I mean, you've heard of sous vide, but this is, well, saddle-cooked steak. Bon appetit! Your fingers drift to the worn leather of your own saddle, tracing the patterns etched by years of sun and sweat. You wonder, what did it smell like? Probably a bit like old boots mixed with smoked meat and maybe a hint of dust. Not the kind of thing you'd want bottled as a cologne, but for a rider under the endless stars, it was the scent of home. A gust of wind rattles the grass, and you pull your blanket tighter, tucking it under your chin. You think about the riders who came before you, how they learned to read the sky, track the stars, and navigate by the feel of the earth under their horses' hooves. The Mongols weren't just warriors, they were survivalists, engineers of the wild, masters of making do with whatever they had. And out here, that often meant making dinner while on the move. Your horse shifts beneath you, muscles rippling under its skin, and you hear the quiet sigh of another rider nearby. The fire crackles, sending a puff of smoke into the night, and you catch a faint scent of singed hair. Probably someone's ponytail got a little too close. It's moments like this that make you realize how fragile it all is. The thin line between warmth and cold, full and hungry, safe and, well, not so safe. You lean back, staring up at the stars, and let the rhythm of the night settle over you. The grass whispers in the wind, the horses breathe slow and steady, and the stew, whether it's in a pot or a saddlebag, keeps simmering quietly, a reminder that even in the middle of nowhere, people find ways to keep going. And just when you think you're ready to drift off, a voice pipes up from across the fire. "Hey, anyone seen my spoon?" A chorus of soft laughter breaks the silence, a moment of shared humanity under a sky that doesn't care if you're hungry, cold, or missing your spoon. You smile, letting the sound wash over you, and somewhere in the back of your mind, you make a mental note, maybe bring an extra spoon next time. The fire's glow fades into a soft, pulsing warmth as the night deepens. The kind of quiet that settles in your chest like a weighted blanket. You shift a little in your saddle, feeling the stiffness creep into your legs, and you think, there's no way you'd make it as a Mongol rider. Not for a week, not even for a day, honestly. Your back's already sore, your knees feel like they've aged a decade, and don't even get me started on the chafing. Yeah, you probably wouldn't survive. Not unless you had a secret weapon, like a stew bubbling in your saddlebag. Because that's the thing, you're not just riding out here, you're cooking. Well, not you exactly, the horse is. Every step, every jolt, every canter, it's like a slow massage for the tough cuts of meat tucked away in that leather pouch. The heat from the horse's body, the friction of the leather, the subtle bounce. Turns out that's just enough to start the magic. Meat, a few grains, maybe a sprinkle of salt if you're feeling fancy. And after a long day's ride, you've got yourself a kind of stew. A meal that's been massaged into existence by miles of step and sweat. You wrinkle your nose a little at the thought. I mean, sure, it's technically food, but do you want it? That's another story. And yet, the riders swear by it. The story goes that Genghis Khan once joked, well, joked might be generous, let's say commented, that a man could cross 1,000 miles with nothing but a horse and a hunk of meat in his bag. No fire, no kitchen, no forks or spoons. Just raw grit and a saddlebag stew sloshing along with you. Some historians still scratch their heads over this one. Could the heat of a horse's body really cook the meat enough to eat safely? Or was this more of a tenderizing trick, a way to soften the fibers so they didn't feel like chewing leather belts? No one's quite sure. There are journals, vague mentions, and a few whispered stories passed down through generations. But you know how it goes with history. Some of it's fact, some of it's wishful thinking, and a whole lot of it is just people trying to sound tougher than they probably were. A cool gust of wind snakes down your collar, and you shiver, pulling your blanket tighter. The horses shuffle their hooves, and you hear a soft snort, like they're sharing an inside joke you'll never be cool enough to understand. Your own stomach grumbles, and you think about that stew, simmering gently, the fat melting into the grain, the aroma thick and meaty. There's something oddly comforting about the idea. You might not love the idea of your dinner marinating in horse sweat, but out here, you'd probably eat it, maybe even enjoy it, if it meant a warm meal and a cold night. A rider nearby is humming softly, a tune that loops and meanders like the wind itself. You can't quite place it, probably an old song passed down from someone's grandmother's grandmother. It's the kind of sound that makes the stars seem closer, like they're leaning in to listen too. And then, as if on cue, a voice murmurs from the shadows, half laughing. Remember that time Batar tried to cook dumplings in his saddlebag? Thought they'd turn out like little meat pillows. Ended up more like soggy socks. A low ripple of laughter spreads around the fire, and you can't help but grin. Imagine that. A dumpling bouncing along inside a saddle, getting half squished with every gallop. It's both ridiculous and completely believable. Because when you're crossing the steppe, you make do. You improvise. You get creative in ways you didn't know you could. Whether that's turning your saddle into a kitchen or pretending that dried cheese bricks are a delicacy. Speaking of cheese, have you heard about the time they tried to store horse milk in a goat's stomach for too long? Yeah, let's just say that didn't end well. The smell alone could clear a camp. But back to the stew. You watch as a rider ladles a scoop of steaming broth into a battered metal cup. He slurps it down, the sound almost obscene in the quiet, and then sighs, long and low, like the wind curling through the grass. You wonder if it tastes like home to him, or if he's just pretending it does. Out here, sometimes you have to pretend. Your own stomach clenches, and you close your eyes for a moment, imagining the taste. Salty, a little gamey, probably with bits of fat that stick to your teeth. Not the kind of meal you'd post on Instagram, but maybe that's the point. It's not about perfection. It's about survival, about filling your belly enough to ride another day, to sleep under the stars, to keep going even when the wind gnaws at your bones. The fire pops, sending up a tiny shower of sparks, and you tuck your blanket tighter. The smell of smoke lingers, earthy and warm, and you think, maybe you could make it out here after all, for a night or two at least, as long as you don't have to eat dumplings from a saddlebag. That might just be where you draw the line. The horses shift again, their tails flicking lazily, and the sky stretches overhead, vast, unbothered, ancient. You breathe in the cool air, and for a moment, everything feels still. The steppe hums around you, soft and low, and you let yourself sink into the quiet. Just you, the horses, and the scent of stew simmering somewhere in the dark. It's not much, but sometimes it's enough. The wind's picked up a little now, tugging at the edges of your blanket like it's trying to remind you who's boss out here. The horses shift, their hooves crunching softly in the dirt, tails flicking at invisible flies. You rub your hands together, the skin rough and chapped, and wonder how the Mongols managed to survive not just the cold, but the everything. It's not like they had a pocket full of granola bars or a thermos of hot coffee. Nope. They had their horses, the land, and whatever they could scrape together from the world around them. And that includes fermented horse milk. Yep, you heard me right. Horse milk. Specifically, mare's milk, lovingly churned and fermented into something called airag. Picture this. You're bouncing along on your horse, the leather bag of milk sloshing against the saddle, fermenting with every jolt and sway. By the end of the day, you got a frothy, slightly sour drink that's part hydration, part nutrition, and, depending on how long it's been fermenting, maybe just a little bit alcoholic. Not enough to throw a wild party, but enough to make you feel lighter. Or at least, that's what they claimed. And here's the weird part. Airag wasn't just a drink. It was a fuel, a medicine, even a symbol of hospitality. You'd offer it to guests as a sign of welcome, but also use it as a remedy for anything from a headache to a sore back. Some Mongols even swore that a splash of airag on a wound could help it heal faster. Would I recommend trying that? Probably not. But it tells you a lot about how resourceful they were, making use of everything, even the frothy byproducts of a day's ride. Your horse snorts softly, and you glance over to see a rider tipping back a leather flask, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. The smell drifts over, sharp, tangy, with, let's call it earthy. It's not exactly the kind of thing you'd want in a smoothie, but out here, it's liquid gold. You lean back in your saddle, imagining the first person who ever thought, hey, let's milk this horse, shake it around a bit, leave it in the sun, and then drink it. That's a level of culinary bravery most of us just don't have. I mean, the closest you've probably come to that is leaving a yogurt cup in your car overnight. And let's be honest, you didn't drink it the next day, did you? But the Mongols, they embraced it. They lived by it. Airag was their comfort, their medicine, their celebration drink. A wedding? Airag. A birth? Airag. A long ride across 1,000 miles of steppe? Oh yeah, definitely airag. And yet, as with so many things in history, there's debate. Some scholars argue that airag wasn't essential as the stories suggest, that maybe it was more of a regional thing, or a status symbol, or even a bit of an acquired taste. Others claim it was the lifeblood of the steppe, a daily ritual as important as water. The truth, as always, is probably somewhere in between. A gust of wind makes the fire sputter, and the smoke curls around you, sharp and bitter. You blink, eyes watering, and remember an odd little fact. Did you know that some Mongols believed the smell of airag could ward off evil spirits? They'd hang bags of it near the door of a tent or sprinkle a bit near their horses, just in case. You imagine a modern-day version of that, walking into someone's house and being hit by the tangy scent of fermented horse milk. That's one way to keep uninvited guests away, I suppose. You shift again, feeling the stiffness in your spine, and think about how these people lived in constant motion, riding, hunting, fighting, cooking, without the comforts you take for granted. No stoves, no pots, no recipe books. Just instinct, tradition, and whatever the steppe offered. It makes you feel small in a good way, like you're part of something much bigger, stretching back through time. A rider nearby lets out a soft laugh, murmuring something about a time he tried to make butter from airag and ended up with a mess that smelled like, well, let's just say it wasn't pleasant. You can't help but grin, imagining a group of tough Mongol warriors standing around, sniffing at a lump of sour, smelly butter, pretending it wasn't that bad. Your stomach growls again, and you wonder, would you try it? The airag, the butter, the stew, the dumplings? Maybe you would. Out here, under this vast sky, with the wind in your face and the horses breathing slow and steady beside you, it's hard to be picky. Hunger has a way of making even the weirdest meals taste like home. The fire crackles softly, the smoke curling in lazy tendrils, and the stars shimmer overhead, silent, ancient, and utterly indifferent to the strange, bouncing meals cooked on saddles far below. You sigh, your breath misting in the cold, and let the hum of the steppe lull you deeper into the night. Just you, the horses, and the sour tang of airag in the air. The fire's glow is barely a flicker now, casting soft shadows that seem to dance in slow circles across the grass. Your eyelids feel heavy, but the chill in the air keeps you just alert enough to notice the small things. The creak of saddle leather, the faint rustle of a horse's mane in the wind, the low murmur of a rider softly humming a tune you don't know. It's like the world has shrunk to this tiny patch of earth, and everything else, the cities, the clocks, the busy blinking screens, has slipped away. And that's when you hear it, a sharp hiss, followed by a quick shout and a curse in a language that's older than most of the buildings you've ever walked past. Someone's cut their finger. You glance over, and there it is, blood, bright and startling against the firelight, dripping onto the ground. But here's the weird part. They don't seem too worried. In fact, someone else is already rummaging in a saddlebag, pulling out a small leather pouch. Inside, salt. Not for seasoning the stew, but for something else entirely. A pinch of salt, a dash of sheep's blood. These were the kitchen staples of the steppe, though not always for the reasons you might think. Mongols used salt to treat wounds, to preserve meat, to flavor food, and even in some pretty odd rituals. And the blood? Well, let's just say it wasn't just for cooking. You watch as the injured rider presses salt into the cut, wincing slightly, then wraps it tight with a strip of cloth. The smell of the salt drifts over to you, sharp and clean, mixing with the faint metallic scent of blood. It's an odd combination, one that makes your nose wrinkle and your stomach twist just a little. But out here, you use what you got. And if that means a little sheep's blood in your stew for extra flavor, well, who are you to argue? It's strange, isn't it? The things people did to survive. Mongol riders sometimes carried a small bladder of sheep's blood, using it like a protein-packed energy drink on long rides. They'd squeeze a bit into their mouths or stir it into water or milk. It sounds intense, but when you're riding for days across the steppe, you don't exactly get to be picky. And here's the kicker. Some riders believed that drinking blood kept their spirits strong, kept them connected to the earth, the sky, the very soul of the steppe itself. Of course, not everyone agreed. Some historians argue that the whole blood-drinking thing was more symbolic than practical. Maybe it was a ritual, a story that got exaggerated over time, or even just a way to intimidate enemies by saying, yeah, we drink blood, what of it? Others think it was a bit of both, part survival tactic, part cultural flex. The debate's still going, and honestly, it probably always will. You shift in your seat, feeling the weight of the night settle over you, and you can't help but wonder, what would you do out here if you had nothing but a horse, a knife, and a bag of salt? Would you drink the blood? Would you sprinkle salt into your tea? Would you stare up at the stars, trying to remember the last time you tasted something sweet or soft or warm? A breeze stirs the grass, and a rider chuckles low in their throat, mumbling something about the time I mistook a salt brick for a pillow. You grin, picturing it. Some poor soul, exhausted, lying down on what they thought was a soft spot, only to wake up with a mouthful of salt and a sore neck. The kind of story that gets passed around fires like this, growing a little funnier every time it's told. The fire pops, and a tiny ember drifts into the dark, vanishing almost before you can follow it. You think about how these riders lived, how they carried not just food, but tools, memories, beliefs, tucked into every fold of leather, every creak of the saddle. How a simple thing like a pinch of salt or a splash of blood could mean the difference between living and, well, not. Your stomach grumbles again, and you wonder what that stew tastes like now. Rich and salty, maybe a little gamey, with the tang of sheep's blood woven through it. The kind of meal that makes your teeth ache a little, but also fills your belly enough to get you through the night. Not exactly comfort food, but out here on the steppe, comfort is a luxury. Survival is the goal. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the wind press gently against your face. The grass whispers around you, soft and low, and the horses breathe slow and steady, like the earth itself is settling in for the night. Somewhere a rider coughs, a sharp, dry sound that echoes briefly before fading into the dark. You take a deep breath, the air sharp and cold, and feel a strange sort of gratitude, not for the stew or the salt or the blood, but for the quiet, for the way the world feels small and simple out here, with nothing but the fire, the stars, and the endless whispering grass. Just you, the night, and the strange, gritty taste on your tongue. The wind shifts again, carrying with it the faintest scent of charred fat and something else, warm, savory, and just a little smoky. Your stomach tightens in response, that deep gnawing hunger that comes when you've been out in the cold for too long. You tug the blanket tighter, tucking it around your shoulders like a protective shell, and lean into the scent, letting it draw you in. That's when you see it. A rider reaches into his saddlebag and pulls out a dumpling of all things. Not the kind you'd get at a fancy dim sum place, all delicate folds and shiny translucent skins. No, this one's a little, well, let's just say it's seen better days. Lopsided, a bit flattened, with a crust that looks suspiciously like it's been pressed into the shape of a saddle strap. You can't help but smile, because yes, Mongol riders really did try to cook dumplings in their saddlebags. It wasn't a daily delicacy, more like an occasional treat, a bit of comfort food for a long ride. The heat from the horse's body, the friction from the constant movement, the pressure of the saddle straps, it all combined to create a low and slow cooking environment. Imagine your dinner being slowly flattened, warmed, and bounced into submission by a galloping horse. And here's the kicker. Some riders believed these dumplings actually made them faster. that there was some kind of magical, energy-giving power in a dumpling that had been blessed by the rhythm of the ride. Superstition, probably, but you know how people are. Sometimes you need to believe that the thing you're doing, no matter how weird it seems, is making you stronger. Of course, not everyone agreed. Some riders swore by the dumplings. Others called them soggy bricks. And historians? Well, they're still debating whether the whole saddlebag dumpling thing was a widespread practice or just a quirky footnote in the larger story of Mongol survival. You know how it goes. Some scholars argue it was a clever adaptation, a way to make the most of limited resources. Others think it's more legend than fact, a tale that got stretched and shaped like the dumplings themselves. Either way, you can't stop picturing it. A tough, battle-hardened rider reaching into his saddlebag mid-ride, pulling out a dumpling that's been squashed into the shape of a horseshoe, brushing off a bit of horsehair and popping it into his mouth with a satisfied grunt. It's oddly charming, in a gritty, survivalist kind of way. A gust of wind sends a puff of ash swirling from the fire, and you cough, the smoky taste catching in your throat. You imagine the scene centuries ago, riders clustered around a campfire just like this one, swapping stories of dumplings gone wrong, laughing about who had the worst saddle-cooked disaster. Maybe someone once tried to get fancy, adding a bit of dried berries or wild herbs they'd foraged along the way. Maybe it worked, or maybe it ended up as a sticky mess they scraped off the inside of their saddlebag for days afterward. And you know what? You kind of admire them. These were people who didn't have the luxury of picky eating. No recipe blogs, no food critics, no fancy plating. Just a simple question. Will this fill my belly enough to get me through the night? If the answer was yes, then that was good enough. Your horse shifts beneath you, and you adjust your seat, feeling the familiar ache settle into your hips and lower back. The grass rustles softly in the wind, and somewhere nearby, a rider hums a quiet tune. You wonder if he's thinking about dumplings too, or maybe just the sound of the wind, the stars overhead, the way the fire's warmth seeps into your skin. The fire pops, sending a tiny ember into the air, and for a moment you imagine it drifting into the darkness, landing in the grass, maybe igniting some ancient story waiting to be told. The stars blink above, silent witnesses to every meal, every laugh, every strange saddle-bounce dumpling. You take a slow breath, the air sharp and clean, and let yourself sink into the rhythm of the night. The steppe stretches out around you, endless and unbothered, and you think, maybe you wouldn't survive long out here. But for now, under this sky, in this moment, you're exactly where you need to be. Just you, the horses, the quiet crackle of the fire, and the lingering thought of dumplings cooked by the rhythm of the ride. The night air is sharp now, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones, making your breath curl in little wisps that vanish before your eyes. The fire crackles low, a lazy sound that barely seems to keep up with the wind's gentle howling across the steppe. You pull your blanket tighter, feeling the stiffness in your back from the long day's ride, and glance at the other riders huddled nearby. No one says much, just the quiet shuffle of boots, the occasional sniff, and the soft, rhythmic clink of someone fiddling with their knife. The firelight flickers across tired faces, casting long shadows that make the riders look older, worn by the wind, the cold, the sheer distance of it all. And that's when you catch the scent, faint but unmistakable. The smell of roasting meat, but without a fire. You blink, puzzled, and turn your head to follow the smell. That's when you spot it. A rider crouched low, carefully scraping at the earth with the heel of his boot. A small patch of sand, still warm from the day's sun, is being uncovered like a hidden treasure. He reaches in and with a soft grunt pulls out a bundle wrapped in cloth, the edges darkened with heat. As he unwraps it, the smell hits you full force. Rich, savory, a little smoky, and something else. It's a kind of meat cooked not over flame, but under the earth. You stare, half in awe, half in disbelief. The idea of cooking without a fire, just heat and patience, it's almost magical. And yet, here it is, as real as the chill in the air. The rider tears off a piece, steam rising into the night, and offers it around. You hesitate because, let's be honest, you're not sure if it smells like dinner or a pair of socks left in a gym bag for a week. But hunger wins out, as it often does, and you take a bite. It's unexpected, a little dry, a little gritty, with a hint of earthiness that makes you feel like you're chewing on the steppe itself. But there's fat in there too, and salt, and a smoky flavor that lingers on your tongue. Not bad, not good exactly, but not bad. The kind of meal that fills your belly, if not your soul. And that's the thing. You learn quickly out here that food isn't about pleasure. It's about fuel, about survival, about making do with what you have, where you are, even if that means burying your dinner in the sand and hoping the sun does its job. Some writers say the technique was a gift from the gods, an accidental discovery when someone lost a hunk of meat, only to find it later perfectly cooked. Others claim it was all part of the Mongol resourcefulness. No fire means no smoke. No smoke means no enemies can track you. A hidden meal cooked low and slow while you rest or ride or fight. Of course, as with everything else, historians still argue about it. Some say it was rare, a trick used only when absolutely necessary. Others believe it was a common practice, passed down through generations of riders who knew how to read the land as well as they read the stars. You pull the blanket higher, tucking it under your chin, and glance down at the patch of sand where the roast had been hidden. The earth is dark there, still warm, and you wonder how many meals have been buried and uncovered on this very ground. How many stories were shared over bites of sand-cooked meat? Your horse shifts, and you stroke its neck absently, feeling the coarse hair under your fingers. The smell of the roast still lingers in the air, earthy, rich, a little bit wild. You imagine trying that back home, burying a steak in your backyard and hoping for the best. Yeah, probably not. A soft chuckle drifts through the camp, and you hear someone mumble about the time Borte lost her meat in the sand for 3 days and swore it tasted better than any stew. Another rider grunts, unimpressed, and mutters that it probably just tasted like old boots. You smile, letting the gentle banter wash over you like a lullaby. The stars seem brighter tonight, pinpricks of cold light scattered across the sky, and you let your eyes trace the patterns, the familiar shapes that have guided riders for centuries. The wind whispers through the grass, the horses breathe slow and steady, and the fireless roast settles in your belly like a warm stone. You close your eyes, letting the weight of the night press gently against you, and think, maybe you could get used to this. The strange meals, the quiet stories, the way the earth and the sky seem to hold you in their arms, even when the wind howls and the fire fades. Just you, the steppe, and the odd smoky taste of a meal cooked without flame. The night has deepened into that peculiar kind of stillness where even the wind seems to hush, holding its breath, waiting for something. The fire has all but faded now, just a few glowing embers winking like sleepy eyes in the dark. The grass whispers softly under the moonlight, swaying gently as if to an old forgotten song. You shift in your saddle, the leather creaking beneath you, and stretch your stiff legs, wincing at the dull ache in your knees. Your breath puffs in the cold air, mingling with the faint scent of horse, smoke, and something else. Something dry, sharp, almost dusty. You glance around and catch sight of a rider gnawing on what looks like, well, you're not sure at first, a chunk of something pale and hard, the edges crumbling under his teeth. It takes you a second, and then it clicks. Cheese. Or rather, something like cheese. Because this isn't the soft, creamy kind of cheese you'd spread on a cracker while sipping a glass of wine on a lazy Sunday afternoon. No, this is something entirely different. It's called arul, a Mongol cheese so hard it could double as a weapon in a pinch. Made from curdled milk, shaped into bricks, and left to dry in the sun for days, sometimes weeks, until it's so solid you could probably use it to hammer in tent stakes. You watch as the rider scrapes at the edge with a knife, shaving off thin, crumbly bits that he pops into his mouth with a satisfied grunt. The taste, you imagine, is, well, let's say acquired. A little sour, a little tangy, with a texture somewhere between chalk and that one time you accidentally bit into a piece of stale bread that had been hiding in the back of your pantry for 6 months? Yeah, that. Still, it's food. Long-lasting, portable, and packed with just enough nutrition to keep a rider going. In a land where fresh supplies could be days or even weeks away, that kind of shelf life wasn't just handy, it was survival. And yet, as with so many things, there's a bit of debate. Some historians argue that arul was a staple of the Mongol diet, a daily necessity tucked into saddlebags alongside knives and bits of rope. Others suggest it was more of a fallback, a just-in-case kind of food when nothing else was available. The truth? Probably somewhere in between. After all, you don't make something that tastes like a cross between sour cream and plaster unless you really need to. A soft laugh drifts across the campfire's dying glow, and you hear someone joke about how arul was the secret to Mongol toughness. If you can chew that stuff, you can chew through anything. Another voice chimes in. Except maybe Bautar's boots. Remember when he tried to dry those by the fire and they ended up tasting like arul? More laughter, low and warm, and you find yourself smiling despite the cold. You glance up at the sky, tracing the familiar arc of the stars, and wonder how many generations of riders have done the same. Leaning back after a long day, sucking on a bit of arul, watching the stars flicker and fade. It's a humbling thought, really, that simple, unremarkable things, cheese bricks, worn saddles, the soft nicker of a horse in the dark, have stitched together lives across centuries. You imagine the taste lingering on your tongue, sharp, dry, maybe a little bitter, but oddly satisfying in the way that all survival foods tend to be. Not a meal you'd serve at a dinner party, sure, but one that keeps you alive, that gives you the energy to keep riding, keep moving, keep dreaming. Your horse shifts, blowing a soft breath through its nostrils, and you pat its neck gently, feeling the warmth radiating through its thick winter coat. The wind stirs the grass again, a soft sigh against the earth, and you let yourself sink deeper into the quiet, the stories, the taste of a food that's as much about endurance as it is about hunger. And as your eyes begin to drift closed, you make a mental note. Next time you're home, maybe try making your own arul, just for fun, just to see. But maybe don't leave it drying on your windowsill for too long. The wind picks up again, a low hum threading through the tall grasses, rustling like 1,000 whispers in the dark. It carries the scent of the steppe, earthy, faintly metallic, and sharp with the tang of sweat and old leather. You shiver a little, tucking the blanket higher around your neck, and listen to the quiet murmurs of the riders nearby. That's when you hear it, a sudden brash, unmistakable sound, a hiccup, then another, and then a full-bellied laugh that cracks across the cold night air like a whip. You glance over, eyebrows raised, just in time to see a rider, red-faced, grinning, and very clearly feeling something, waving a flask in the air. Yep, it's the airag again. Fermented horse milk, the fuel of the steppe, the drink that turns quiet nights into slightly louder, slightly wobblier nights. And apparently, it's also the cure for hangovers, or so they say. You watch as the rider takes another swig, then lets out a long, satisfied sigh. The others chuckle, some shaking their heads, others holding out their hands for a sip. It's like a ritual. Sip, laugh, sigh, repeat. And honestly, you kinda get it. Out here, under the endless sky, with the cold biting at your fingers and the fire down to its last embers, a little buzz goes a long way. But the hangover cure, that's where it gets weird. Mongols believed that the best way to cure a headache was more airag, a little hair of the horse, so to speak. Plus, singing loudly, as if the vibrations would shake the ache out of your skull and send it floating off into the wind. You imagine it now, a group of warriors, heads pounding after a long night of storytelling and airag, standing together at sunrise, belting out a song in voices rough as the steppe itself. The horses probably watched with something between amusement and mild concern. And yes, historians still debate this one too. Some say the singing was a genuine tradition, a way to bond, to push through the fatigue and greet the day with a bit of humor. Others think it was just what happens when you mix strong fermented milk and a lot of bravado. Either way, it's a funny image. Rough, fierce riders of the steppe, known for their battles and conquests, standing in a loose circle, clutching their heads and singing at the top of their lungs. A soft snore breaks the quiet, and you glance over to see a rider dozing, his head tipped back, mouth slightly open. You wonder what he's dreaming of. Horses running free across the plains, maybe, or the warm, sour taste of the drink still lingering on his tongue. The air feels thicker now, heavy with the scent of leather and smoke, and you pull your blanket tighter, trying to sink deeper into the warmth. Your own eyelids droop, but you force them open, just for a moment, to catch the glow of the stars above. They're so bright, it's almost absurd, like someone scattered diamonds across a black velvet cloth and forgot to pick 'em up. A quiet cough, a shuffle of boots, the soft snort of a horse. It all blends into a low, steady hum, the sound of life out here in the middle of nowhere. You imagine the ancient riders, centuries ago, doing exactly what you're doing now, huddling against the cold, sipping airag, swapping stories, and maybe, just maybe, singing away their headaches with a little too much enthusiasm. You smile, letting the image settle in your mind like a warm stone, and think, maybe the next time you wake up with a headache, you'll try singing too. Or maybe not. The fire flickers lower, barely more than a whisper of light now, and the steppe seems to lean in, listening, watching. Your breath slows, your muscles relax, and you feel the weight of the night settle over you like a soft, heavy blanket. Just you, the quiet, the faint tang of airag in the air, and the distant, imagined sound of riders belting out songs to the stars. The fire has burned down to a soft, glowing pulse, barely there, like a heart beating low and slow in the quiet. The night wraps around you, a cold velvet blanket, and the horses have settled into a rhythm of soft breaths, their tails flicking lazily in the dark. You pull the blanket tighter, tucking it under your chin, and for a moment the only sound is the crackle of the last few embers, a faint, steady reminder that even out here in the vast emptiness of the steppe, warmth is a precious thing. And then, from across the camp, you catch a whiff of something odd. Not the usual scent of leather and sweat and smoke, but something sharper, deeper, almost metallic. You glance over, and there, sitting in a circle, their faces half lit by the dying fire, are a few riders, huddled close around a battered iron pot. The liquid inside glimmers darkly in the light, and you realize what it is. Broth. Bone broth. The kind made from whatever scraps they could find. Bits of marrow, slivers of sinew, cracked bones boiled down to extract every last bit of strength. One rider leans forward, ladling the steaming broth into a small metal cup, and takes a sip, eyes half closed, like he's tasting not just the flavor, but the memories it holds. You catch a faint scent of fat, of earthiness, of something that makes your stomach twist in both hunger and hesitation. Because this isn't just food. It's a story, a history, a ritual passed down from riders long gone. They say that once Mongol warriors boiled bones in their helmets when they had nothing else. The iron would get hot, the broth would bubble, and the helmet, well, it doubled as a pot, a badge of survival. You picture it now, a rider, fierce and grimy, holding his helmet over a fire, the steam rising like a signal to the sky. It's practical, sure, but also kind of badass. and a little gross if you think too hard about it. Of course, not everyone agrees. Some historians argue that the helmet broth story is more legend than fact, a tall tale told around fires to make the warriors seem even tougher than they already were. Others swear it happened, pointing to scraps of old records, fragments of stories passed down from the steppe. As usual, the truth probably rides somewhere in between, half history, half bravado, all mixed together like the strange simmering stew itself. You lean back, closing your eyes for a moment, and imagine the taste of that broth. Rich, heavy, a little gritty, maybe with bits of marrow clinging to the rim of the cup. The kind of thing that sticks in your teeth and your memory both. You wonder if it tasted good, or if it just tasted like survival, like getting by, like another day lived under the vast, unbothered sky. A rider laughs softly, telling a story you only half catch. Something about a time he dropped his helmet into the fire and spent the next hour trying to fish it out with a stick. Another mutters that the best broth comes from bones cracked with a stone, not a knife, because it frees the spirit inside. You're not sure if that's poetic or just superstition, but either way, you like the sound of it. The idea that even a bone, stripped of its flesh, still holds a kind of life inside, waiting to be coaxed out by heat and time. The wind sighs through the grass, and you pull the blanket tighter, letting the scent of broth and smoke settle around you like an old familiar coat. Your eyes drift to the stars again, tracing the same shapes riders have followed for centuries, and you think, how many cups of bone broth have been sipped under this same sky? How many nights have been spent just like this, with the fire low, the stories soft, and the quiet stretching on and on, as far as the eye can see. The horses snuffle in the dark, a soft, steady sound that blends with the crackle of the fire and the quiet, murmured voices. You feel your breath slow, your heartbeat settle, and the weight of the night press gently against you. Just you, the stars, the taste of ancient broth lingering in the air, and the thought of helmets doubling as soup pots. A reminder that history is, at its heart, a collection of small, strange moments that somehow kept people going. The fire is nothing more than a faint, glowing memory now, a few stubborn embers clinging to the last traces of warmth. The cold has crept in fully, sharp and biting, making you pull your blanket tight, every breath turning into a soft cloud that drifts up and disappears. The horses stand like dark statues, their heads low, tails flicking in slow, tired arcs. And then, as if the wind itself has a sense of humor, a gust kicks up and rattles the tents, sending a few loose pebbles skittering across the packed earth. You blink, shifting to adjust the blanket, and catch sight of something odd, a strip of raw meat draped casually over the saddle of a nearby horse. At first, you think it's a mistake, something forgotten mid-meal. But no, it's deliberate. You squint, watching as the rider, an older man with a beard like scraggly moss, leans over, checks the meat, and nods in quiet approval. This, it turns out, is the meat curtain trick, a classic steppe move. Take a slab of meat, hang it behind the saddle, and let the sun and wind do their thing while you ride. The heat softens it, the motion tenderizes it, And by the time you stop for the night, you've got a meal. Sun-dried, steppe-aged, with a hint of horsehair if you're not careful. You raise an eyebrow at the thought. Meat, drying as you gallop, flapping like a tiny flag of survival. It's both ingenious and, let's be honest, a little unsettling. But when you think about it, it makes a strange kind of sense. After all, why waste time sitting by a fire when the motion of the ride can do the job for you? And as always, there's debate. Some historians claim it was a common practice, a clever way to soften tough cuts of meat while on the move. Others argue it was rare, maybe even exaggerated in stories told by wide-eyed travelers who marveled at the Mongols' toughness. Who's right? Hard to say. The truth probably smells a little like horse and a little like salt. You imagine the taste, probably a bit leathery, maybe with a hint of saddle polish, but rich with fat and salt, enough to get you through another cold night. And you wonder, would you try it? Would you hang a slab of meat off the back of your bike or your car, let it flap in the wind all day and call it dinner? Probably not. But then again, you're not a Mongol rider, crossing endless miles of steppe with nothing but a horse, a knife, and a stubborn will to keep going. A soft laugh drifts through the night as one of the younger riders jokes, "Careful you don't lose your meat. Last time Batar's strip fell off somewhere near the river, and the dogs had a feast." Another rider chuckles, adding, "He swore it tasted better for the adventure." You grin, imagining the dogs trotting off with their prize, tails wagging, while poor Batar curses the wind and the bumpy path. It's a reminder that even in the toughest lives, there's always room for a bit of humor, a bit of loss, a bit of letting go. Your fingers brush against the worn leather of your saddle, and you feel a strange sense of connection, not just to the riders around you, but to the ones who came before, to the generations who learned to make do with what they had, who understood that food wasn't always about taste, it was about survival, about keeping your body moving when the world wanted you to stop. The wind sighs again, softer now, as if it's tired too, and you close your eyes for a moment, letting the night settle around you. The meat flaps gently in the breeze, a quiet rhythmic sound that blends with the soft breathing of the horses and the low murmur of distant voices. You breathe in deep, the cold, the leather, the faint scent of salted meat, and think, maybe you wouldn't make it long out here, but for tonight, at least, you're part of this strange, resilient, quietly stubborn world. Just you, the steppe, the stars, and a strip of meat dancing in the wind like a flag waving hello to history itself. The night hums low and steady now, the fire reduced to the faintest pulse of heat in the dark, like a whisper of warmth you can almost but not quite feel. The horses stand in quiet clusters, their ears flicking at the occasional insect, their breath rising in slow, steady puffs. The wind, too, has settled into a gentler rhythm, brushing across the grass in long, sighing waves that seem to carry the echoes of every rider who's ever passed this way. You shift in your seat, stretching your legs just a little, and that's when you catch the sound, an odd, faint clink, followed by a soft chuckle. A few riders are passing something around, their faces half hidden by the shadows. It's a small, battered pouch, and from it they're pulling pebbles? You squint, leaning in a little, and sure enough, Each rider pops a small, round pebble into their mouth, sucks on it for a bit, then spits it out with a low, satisfied sigh. It's not food exactly. It's a game, a survival trick, a way to trick the body into thinking there's something to chew on, something salty, something to stave off the thirst when water's scarce. You watch as they grin at each other, a few nudging elbows in a quiet, teasing way. One rider mutters, "Careful you don't crack a tooth, though." Another grins, bearing a chipped molar as if to say, "Yeah, too late for me." The pebble trick isn't unique to the Mongols. Lots of desert and steppe cultures used it. But out here, in the endless sprawl of grass and sky, it takes on a particular charm. The idea that you can't always have what you need, so you improvise. You find a smooth, salty stone, maybe one left behind by some long-vanished sea, and you let it roll around in your mouth. A poor man's candy, a tiny, hard promise that you're going to keep moving, no matter what. And of course, there are debates about it. Some historians think the pebble thing was more a myth than a widespread habit, a story travelers like to tell to make the Mongols even more rugged than they already were. Others argue that it was common sense, a trick born out of sheer necessity. After all, when you're riding for days without a stream in sight, you'll try anything to keep your mouth from going dry and your spirits from sinking. You shift a little, imagining the feeling. The pebble, cold and hard against your tongue. The faint saltiness mixing with the dust and the dryness of your own breath. Would it help? Maybe just enough. Maybe enough to keep you riding through the heat of the day, the endless sway of the saddle, the ache in your legs. A rider nearby gives a quiet laugh, mumbling something about how he once swallowed a pebble by accident and spent the next 2 days feeling like I had a stone in my gut, because I did. The others chuckle, a soft ripple of sound that floats up into the dark like smoke. The fire flickers, a final breath of light before it gives up entirely, and the stars overhead seem to lean in a little closer, brighter now against the black. You tilt your head back, letting your gaze drift across the sky, and think about all the strange small tricks people have come up with just to make it through. Pebbles, dumplings, meat hanging from saddles, cheese bricks that could break a tooth. It's humbling, really, the sheer persistence of it all. The way hunger, thirst, and exhaustion push you to invent, to adapt, to play little games with your own body just to keep going. Another mile, another hour, another breath. The wind shifts again, cooler now, and you pull your blanket tighter, the fabric rough against your cheek. The horses snuffle softly, the grass whispers low, and the stars shimmer, cold and distant and utterly indifferent. Just you, the steppe, a pebble rolling across your tongue, and the quiet, unspoken promise that you'll keep going, no matter what. The air has shifted again, just slightly, a subtle change, like a breath held and slowly released across the grasslands. The night hums low, steady, and the world feels softer somehow, as if the wind has forgotten to whisper for a while. Your blanket feels heavier on your shoulders now, though maybe that's just the weight of the hours passing, the long stretch of time folding gently into itself. You glance around the camp, and that's when you catch the faint scent. Spices, warm, earthy, a little sharp, drifting across the cold night air like a memory that doesn't quite belong here. You tilt your head, curious, and your eyes find a small cluster of riders huddled in close, their hands moving quickly in the dim glow of a single ember's light. They're unwrapping something from a tight leather pouch, pinching it between their fingers and mixing it into a paste with a bit of water and... Wait, is that horse sweat? You blink, a little unsure if you're imagining it, but no. One rider is holding up a damp cloth, dabbing at the horse's flank and carefully wringing it out over the mixture. A few drops fall, the paste darkens, and someone murmurs, "Perfect." You watch, half fascinated, half horrified, as they stir the mixture, wild herbs, crushed seeds, and yes, the faint tang of horse sweat. It's called quirky, or so they say, a blend of foraged flavors and a little bit of, well, let's call it horse essence. Not exactly something you'd drizzle over pasta, but out here, it's a prized addition to the otherwise plain, rugged diet of meat, cheese, and more meat. And here's where it gets weirder. Some riders believed that the sweat added strength, that it was infused with the power of the horse itself, a kind of vitality you could taste, a wildness that seeped into your veins and made you faster, stronger, tougher. Superstition, sure, but then again, people have believed stranger things. Historians, of course, are split. Some say the whole horse sweat sauce story is just that, a story, exaggerated by travelers eager to make the Mongols seem even more intense than they already were. Others point to scattered accounts, fragments of old texts, and argue that, yes, it probably happened. Not every day, not for every meal, but often enough to leave a trace in the collective memory of the steppe. You imagine the taste now. Sharp, herbal, a little funky, with a hint of salt, and something else. Something that would make you pause for a moment, eyebrows raised, before deciding whether to swallow or spit. It's the kind of flavor that makes you remember where you are. Out here, in the middle of nowhere, where you don't get to be picky. A rider across the fire raises a cup, winks at you, and says, "To the strongest sauce in the steppe," before taking a sip and grinning wide to show a missing tooth. The others chuckle, some clapping their hands, some shaking their heads like they've seen this scene too many times before. The fire cracks once, a soft, low sound that drifts into the night like a sigh. And the smell of the sauce lingers, a little strange, a little wild, a reminder that food, out here, is never just about taste. It's about survival, about tradition, about believing that even a little bit of sweat, a little bit of grit, can make you stronger when the world tries to wear you down. You pull your blanket higher, sinking into the weight of it, and close your eyes for a moment, letting the warmth of the camp seep into your skin. The wind brushes your cheek, soft and steady, and somewhere nearby, a rider hums a tune, low and slow, the kind of melody that loops endlessly in your mind, like a lullaby you didn't know you knew. Just you, the steppe, the faint, peculiar tang of a sauce made from herbs and horse sweat, and the quiet knowledge that sometimes the strangest things are the ones that keep you going. The fire's a memory now, just a faint shimmer of warmth buried in the ashes, and the night stretches wide, vast, and unbroken above you. The horses doze, their breath soft and steady, blending with the gentle rustle of the steppe grass. It's the kind of quiet that feels almost sacred, like the world is holding its breath, waiting for something you can't quite name. And then, like a ripple across still water, a soft murmur passes through the camp. You turn your head, blinking sleepily, and see a few riders stirring, pulling blankets tighter, glancing up at the stars as if searching for something. One of them shifts, a slow, careful movement, and reaches into his saddlebag. Out comes a flat disc, round and pale, dusted with something that might be flour, or maybe just the fine grit of the road. It's bread, or at least the idea of bread. Out here, they call it burzog, though it's not quite what you'd expect if you're used to warm loaves and soft, fluffy slices. This bread is hard, a little chewy, and shaped by the odd, lumpy contours of whatever it was baked against. Sometimes the side of a pot, sometimes a flat stone, and sometimes, when you're on the move, the side of a saddle. Yeah, that's right. Bread baked by the heat of the horse. You stare, half amused, half amazed, as the rider tears off a piece and chews thoughtfully, the edges of the bread crumbling into his beard. Another rider laughs softly, nudging him in the ribs, and says, "Looks like your bread's got a hoofprint in it." The others chuckle, low and warm, and you feel the sound settle around you like a soft blanket. The idea of bread shaped by the saddle, it's kind of absurd, isn't it? And yet it makes a strange kind of sense. The warmth of the horse, the friction of the ride, the long, slow hours with the dough pressed tight against the leather. It's like nature's slow cooker, a way to bake without stopping, without losing a moment of precious travel time. Historians, of course, can't resist weighing in. Some argue that saddle-baked bread was a common trick among Mongol riders, a clever way to make do when there was no fire, no flat stone, no time to stop. Others say it's mostly myth, a tale told by travelers who wanted to make the steppe seem even more wild and strange than it already was. And as always, the truth probably lies somewhere in between. Half practicality, half legend, all stitched together by the long, dusty miles of the steppe. You close your eyes for a moment, imagining the taste. Dry, a little tough, maybe with a hint of leather or sweat if you weren't careful. Not exactly bakery fresh, but when you're hungry enough, it'll do. Out here, it's never about perfect meals. It's about what you can carry, what you can cook on the move, what you can tear with your teeth in the middle of nowhere and still call it sustenance. A rider nearby mutters something about the bread that walked. And you smile, imagining a slice of flatbread bouncing along the steppe, shaped by the rhythm of the ride, by the sway of the horse, by the stubborn will of people who refused to stop just because they were hungry. The stars wheel overhead, cold and clear, and you feel the quiet settle in your bones, the kind that hums like a low note in the back of your mind. The bread is passed around, each rider tearing off a piece, chewing thoughtfully, like they're tasting not just the dough, but the miles behind them and the miles yet to come. You pull your blanket tighter, the fabric rough against your cheek, and think maybe that's what survival is in the end. Not the feast, not the fire, not the perfect meal on a polished plate. It's a slab of bread shaped by a saddle, a story told in the dark, a laugh shared over something so simple, so strange, so stubbornly enough. Just you, the night, the endless steppe, and a bite of bread that tastes a little like dust, a little like leather, and a lot like the will to keep going. The night stretches on, quiet and still, as if the stars themselves are holding their breath, watching. The horses shift in their sleep, a soft ripple of movement that passes through the camp like a gentle wave. You tuck your blanket tighter, feeling the weight of the hours settling in. And then, just when you think the world has gone completely silent, you hear it, a low, rumbling groan. Not from a person, but from a camel. You blink, squinting into the dark, and there they are, off to the side of the camp, a few camels huddled together, their long necks curved like question marks against the night. One of them is lying down, belly flat against a patch of warm rocks, its eyes half-lidded in a look of pure, lazy contentment. And that's when it hits you. The camels aren't just resting. They're cooking dinner. Well, sort of. You watch as a few riders move quietly around the camels, tucking small bundles wrapped tight in cloth underneath the animals' bellies, carefully placing them on the warm stones where the animals have been lying. It's a slow, deliberate process, and you can almost hear the unspoken rule. Don't startle the camel. Don't let it roll over. Don't even think of waking it up. This is what they call the camel's day off, a quirky, practical trick for when the firewood is scarce and the wind's too wild to keep a flame alive. Let the camels do the work. Their body heat, trapped against the sun-warmed stones, creates a slow, gentle warmth, just enough to soften meat, to warm bread, to keep the cold from sinking too deep into your bones. You grin, shaking your head a little. Cooking your dinner by camel. It's the kind of thing you'd hear in a story and laugh at, assuming it was an exaggeration. And yet, here it is, happening right in front of you. Of course, as always, there are debates. Some historians think the camel oven was a clever adaptation, born out of necessity when fires weren't possible. Others argue it's just a rare occasional trick, more myth than method, a tale passed around campfires and exaggerated by wide-eyed traders who wanted to spice up their stories. But standing here, watching the riders carefully unwrap a bundle of meat warmed just enough by the camel's body, it's hard not to believe it. The smell drifts over to you, rich, a little earthy, with a faint, musky undertone that you really hope is from the spices and not the camel itself. A rider holds up a piece of the meat, inspecting it in the dim light, and grins. "Not bad," he says with a shrug, then pops it into his mouth like it's the most natural thing in the world. The others chuckle, a few shaking their heads, a few reaching for their own portions. You imagine the taste, probably a little chewy, a little smoky, maybe with a hint of camel hair if you're unlucky. But it's warm, it's food, it's enough to fill your belly and keep you going through the long, cold night. Your stomach growls and you shift, wondering, would you try it? Would you trust a camel to cook your dinner while it dozes on the rocks? Maybe. Out here, you don't really get to be picky. Survival isn't about perfection. It's about making do, finding warmth where you can, and accepting that sometimes your oven has 4 legs, a hump, and a very grumpy expression if you wake it up too soon. The wind sighs softly through the grass, and you let your breath slow, your body sinking into the quiet. The camels snuffle and shift, the riders murmur low, and the stars wheel overhead, unbothered, eternal. Just you, the steppe, the warm scent of camel-cooked meat drifting in the dark, and the strange, stubborn ingenuity that keeps people alive when the world seems determined to swallow them whole. The night feels heavier now, like the weight of a long, slow breath held by the earth itself. The camels have settled, their grumbles fading into soft sighs, and the horses breathe in slow, even rhythms, their bodies rising and falling like the tides. You shift a little, the stiffness in your back reminding you that you've been sitting too long, but you don't move far. It's too cold, too quiet, too easy to just be here in the lull of the dark. And then there's a new smell, sharp, almost fiery, with a bite that tickles the back of your throat even before you've turned your head. You glance toward the source and spot a small group of riders crouched low, passing around a dark, oily paste in a little wooden jar. One of them dips a finger in, smears it onto a bit of bread, and pops it into his mouth. His eyes squeeze shut, his cheeks puff out, and for a second you think he's about to fall over, but then he grins, wide and satisfied, and passes the jar along. It's a kind of sauce, spicy, pungent, made from whatever the steppe had to offer. Wild herbs, bits of root, crushed seeds, and, according to the whispered joke drifting through the camp, fermented horse sweat. You blink, wondering if you heard that right, and then hear it again. Yeah, the sweat adds the sting, gives it character. You can't help but grin, even as your stomach twists a little at the thought. A sauce made with horse sweat? It's the kind of thing that sounds like a bad joke until you remember where you are. Out here, you use what you got. And if a few drops of horse sweat add flavor to another bland meal, well, you don't ask too many questions. Historians, of course, are all over the place on this one. Some think it was a real thing, a fiery paste mixed with whatever was handy, including sweat, because why not? Others argue it's an exaggeration, a bit of steppe folklore that got spicier every time it was told. And yet, watching the riders dip their bread into the jar, their faces lighten up with the heat, it feels real enough. You imagine the taste now, sharp, hot, a little funky, the kind of thing that makes your eyes water and your throat burn in the best and worst way. The kind of sauce that wakes you up in the middle of a long, cold night and reminds you that you're alive, that you're tough enough to ride across the steppe, that you're not just surviving, you're living. One of the riders wipes his mouth, grins at you with a wink, and says, "Puts hair on your chest." Another snorts, "Yeah," or takes it off, depending on how much you eat. They all laugh, a warm, crackling sound that drifts into the darkness like sparks from a fire. And for a moment, the cold doesn't feel quite so sharp. You pull your blanket tighter, sinking into the warmth, and think about the strange, fierce creativity it takes to thrive in a place like this. A sauce made with wild herbs and horse sweat, a meal cooked under a camel, bread flattened by a saddle, dumplings jostled into shape by the rhythm of a ride. It's not just food, it's a story, a testament, a reminder that no matter how harsh the world gets, people will always find a way to make it their own. The wind sighs low through the grass, and you close your eyes for a moment, letting the scents of the night, smoke, sweat, spice, settle around you. The stars shimmer overhead, distant and steady, as if they've been watching these stories play out for 1,000 years. Just you, the steppe, a fiery sauce that burns and lingers, and the quiet, stubborn resilience of those who refuse to let the cold have the last word. The cold has settled deep into your bones now, a quiet, persistent ache that seeps in through every gap in your blanket, every fold of your clothes. The stars overhead blink slowly, lazily, as if they're waiting for you to drift off so they can get back to whatever it is stars do when no one's watching. The horses shift in their sleep, their hooves crunching softly against the frozen earth, and you breathe in the sharp air, thick with the sense of leather, smoke, and the faint, lingering spice of that curious sauce. You might have thought dinner was over, that the camp had quieted for the night, but no. Across the dim circle of riders, someone's moving again, pulling something from a pouch at their waist, the blade of a knife flashing in the ember light. It's small, thin, and wickedly sharp, and it's not just for cutting food. Out here, a knife is everything. You watch as the rider uses the blade to slice a sliver of dried meat, the motion quick and practiced, the knife so familiar, it's like an extension of his hand. Then he flips it casually, using the tip to stir the last of the embers, poke at a log, and wait, is he cleaning his nails? Yeah, he is. The same knife, the same blade that just cut meat is now scraping dirt from under his fingernails. You suppress a grin, a little amused, a little grossed out, but mostly just impressed. Because a knife out here isn't just a tool, it's a lifeline. It's a fork, a spoon, a fire stoker, a tent peg, a comb for your horse's mane, a toothpick, and, if the stories are to be believed, an impromptu dental tool. Yeah, you heard that right. One of the older riders leans back, holding the knife up to the firelight with a grin, and starts telling a story. His voice is low and slow, the words dragging a little, like they're weighed down by the years. Back when I was a boy, he says, I watched my uncle pull a tooth right out of his mouth with one of these. Tied a bit of string to the hilt, gave it a tug, and he makes a sharp pop sound, grinning like it's the best story ever told. The others laugh, a few wince, and one younger rider mutters, "That explains a lot." You shift a little, feeling the weight of your own teeth in your mouth, and wonder if you'd have the guts to do the same. Probably not. Let's be honest, you barely floss regularly, let alone contemplate yanking a molar with a knife by firelight. And yet, there's something almost comforting about it, the sheer practicality of it all. Out here, you can't afford to be delicate. You can't wait for a dentist. You can't wait for anyone. If you need something done, you figure it out. You make do. You use the tools you have, even if that means a knife sharp enough to slice through a strip of dried meat and a stubborn tooth in the same evening. Historians, naturally, have their doubts. Some argue that the knife dentist stories are just that, stories exaggerated around campfires, told to make riders seem tougher, rougher, more invincible than they really were. Others, though, believe it's entirely possible, pointing to the sheer practicality of it all. If you're miles from the nearest healer, what choice do you have? You pull your blanket tighter, tucking it up to your chin, and feel the weight of the night pressing down. The knife glints one last time before the rider tucks it away, the blade disappearing into the folds of his coat like a secret. The fire sighs low, the embers winking out one by one, and the stars watch in their cold, quiet way. You let your eyes drift close, the sounds of the camp fading into a soft hum, the horses breathing, the wind sighing, and the faint scrape of a blade against wood. And somewhere in the dark, you imagine the quiet, steady resolve it takes to look at a knife and think, yeah, I can use that for dinner, and for pulling a tooth if I have to. Just you, the steppe, the sharp gleam of a blade, and the quiet, stubborn will to survive. The embers have faded now, swallowed by the dark, and the fire's warmth is just a memory clinging faintly to your skin. The wind brushes softly across the steppe, weaving through the tall grasses in slow, sighing waves. And the horses shift in their sleep, a soft rustle of tails and quiet, contented breaths. You stretch a little, the cold biting at your joints, and glance around the camp. Most of the riders have drifted into sleep, curled in their blankets, faces half hidden beneath layers of fabric. But a few remain, hunched together near what's left of the fire, their voices low and careful, like the wind might carry their words too far. And as you listen, you catch the tail end of a story about a midnight feast. It's whispered like a secret, passed from one rider to another, the kind of tale that's only told when the fire's almost out and the night is thick with stars. The story goes like this. Long ago, some Mongol warriors, too hungry to sleep and too stubborn to wait for morning, would sneak out of camp under cover of darkness, carrying with them scraps of dried meat, a crust of bread, maybe a sliver of cheese tucked into a sleeve. They'd gather quietly, out of sight of the commanders, and share their stolen feast in the dark, speaking in whispers, their laughter muffled by the cold. A rebellion in its own small, stubborn way, not against their leaders exactly, but against the endless hunger, the strict rules, the weight of a world that didn't always offer enough. And sometimes, though no one says it too loudly, they'd sneak in a little something extra. A scrap of dried fruit, rare as gold. A pinch of spice, bartered from a trader weeks ago. A strip of meat they'd hidden in the folds of a blanket, saved for just such a night. It wasn't much. It wasn't even good by most standards, but it was theirs. You imagine it now. The taste of salty meat on your tongue, the faint sweetness of dried berries, the rough texture of bread that's gone stale at the edges, the warmth of it, not just from the food itself, but from the act of sharing, of breaking rules, of being human in a world that sometimes tried to grind the humanity right out of you. And of course, historians debate whether these midnight feasts were real or just stories told to make the Mongol riders seem more romantic, more rebellious. Some argue it was common practice, small acts of defiance in the face of hunger. Others think it's a myth, a way to soften the image of the fierce, disciplined warriors with a little touch of mischief. You shift in your blanket, feeling the weight of the night pressing in, and think, maybe it doesn't matter. Whether it happened or not, the story lingers because it feels true. The hunger, the longing, the quiet act of saying, tonight, just for a moment, we'll do things our way. A soft chuckle drifts through the dark, and you hear someone say, "The best meal I ever had was under the stars when I wasn't supposed to." Another murmurs, "A stolen feast always tastes better." You smile, letting the thoughts settle in your mind like a warm coal. It's not about the food itself. It's about the moment, the shared defiance, the quiet reminder that even in the harshest places, people find ways to make life a little sweeter, a little warmer, a little more bearable. The wind whispers low, and you close your eyes, letting the image linger. Riders in the dark, tearing off bits of bread, passing around slivers of meat, laughter hushed but bright, a quiet feast beneath the stars. Just you, the steppe, the taste of rebellion on your tongue, and the soft, secret glow of a midnight meal. The night feels endless now, a slow, unbroken stretch of darkness that wraps around you like a heavy cloak. The air hums low, a soft, distant vibration that seems to rise from the earth itself. You shift under your blanket, the fabric rough against your skin, and listen to the quiet. A few murmurs, the soft shuffle of hooves, the long, slow sigh of the wind brushing across the steppe. And then, just as your eyelids start to drift shut, you hear it, the distinct metallic snick of a knife blade sliding against stone. You open your eyes, blinking against the dark, and there, half lit by the faintest glow of an ember, is a rider, hunched over, sharpening his knife with a kind of quiet reverence. The blade gleams in the low light, catching on the edges, and you realize it's not just for cooking or carving or the occasional impromptu dental work. No, this knife is everything. It's a tool, yes, but also a symbol, a promise, a weapon, a companion that has traveled as far as any horse, as long as any story told on the steppe.
You watch as the rider finishes sharpening, then wipes the blade clean on a strip of cloth, turning it over in his hands like he's checking for secrets hidden in the steel. And as he does, the others lean in, their faces half-shadowed, the air thick with a kind of hushed anticipation. Because this knife, this one knife, has stories. They say it's the same blade that once cut the ropes binding a prisoner in the dead of night. The same blade that carved a message into a tree for an enemy to find. The same blade that once, in a moment of quiet desperation, became a makeshift fishing hook, baited with nothing but stubbornness and a scrap of horsehair. And, in a story told so often, it's hard to know where the truth ends and the legend begins. They say it's the same knife that once saved a man's life, not in battle, not in a hunt, but at the dinner fire. The story goes like this. A rider, too hungry to wait, tried to slice open a sack of hard cheese too quickly. The knife slipped, the blade flashing, and would have cut him deep. But the edge caught on the hardened rind instead, the tip snapping off. The cheese broke, the blade broke, but the man lived. And from that day on, the broken knife was passed around like a charm, a reminder that sometimes it's not strength, but luck, and a well-placed piece of cheese that keeps you alive. Historians, of course, would raise an eyebrow at that tale. They'd argue over the details, point out the inconsistencies, debate whether it was one knife or many, whether it was cheese or bone, or maybe just a twist of luck retold so many times it grew into legend. But out here, with the fire low and the stars pressing close, the details don't really matter. What matters is the knife itself. Sharp, worn, passed from hand to hand, a silent witness to meals eaten in haste, to fights won and lost, to moments of desperation and stubborn, relentless survival. The rider tucks the knife back into his belt, the blade glinting one last time before it disappears into the folds of his coat. The others nod quietly, as if acknowledging the weight of it, the stories it carries, the unspoken promise it holds. You shift under your blanket, feeling the cool press of the air against your cheeks, and think about your own hands, about the tools you hold every day without thinking, about how out here a simple blade becomes something more, a lifeline, a legacy, a reminder that even the smallest, simplest things can carry the weight of 1,000 stories. The wind brushes softly through the grass, the horses breathe slow and steady, and the camp settles deeper into the night, the edges of the world blurring into darkness. Just you, the steppe, the quiet gleam of a blade in the dark, and the knowledge that sometimes the sharpest thing you carry isn't the knife itself, but the stories it holds. The night feels like it's holding its breath now, every sound soft and muffled, like the world is wrapped in a blanket of its own. The stars still blink overhead, cold and distant, but you hardly notice them anymore. Your eyes are heavy, your mind floating somewhere between the sway of the horses and the faint, fading warmth of the fire.
But just as your body starts to relax, your stomach gives a quiet, insistent grumble. It's not a loud protest, more like a soft, pitiful whisper. Hey, remember me. And that's when you see it. One last meal, the saddlebag picnic. It's not much. A few riders sit close together, their backs hunched against the cold, sharing what little they have left. They unpack it slowly, unwrapping bundles like tiny treasures. A strip of dried meat, a crumbling chunk of bread, a sliver of cheese that looks more like a fossil than food. One rider grins, pulling out a small dried apricot, wrinkled, a little sticky, and holds it up like it's the crown jewel of the steppe. They pass the food around, hands brushing, laughter low and tired, but still there, still warm. It's not a feast, not by any stretch, but it's something. A meal shared, no matter how small, feels like more than just fuel. It's a moment, a pause in the endless ride, a reminder that even out here, with the wind howling and the world vast and empty, you're not alone. You close your eyes for a moment, imagining the taste of that apricot, sweet, a little tart, a burst of color against the gray of dried meat and crumbling bread. A reminder of something softer, something alive, even in a world that feels hard and cold. And, of course, there's the debate. There's always a debate. Some say the Mongols never bothered with small luxuries like that they were too focused on survival, too hard-edged for sentiment. Others argue that even the toughest warriors had moments like these, quiet, human pauses, where the rules bent a little, and the ride slowed just enough for a shared meal, a laugh, maybe even a story. You shift under your blanket, pulling it higher over your shoulders, and think, maybe it's not about what's true in the strictest sense. Maybe it's about what feels true. The way hunger softens a man's pride. The way a single piece of fruit can spark a smile in the dark. The way a meal, no matter how small, can feel like a celebration when you share it under the stars. The wind sighs through the camp, carrying with it the faint scent of dried meat and sweat and grass. A rider leans back, letting out a long, quiet breath. And someone murmurs, "Tomorrow we ride again." But for tonight, they sit, they eat, they share. And you, wrapped in your blanket, feel the warmth of it. Not the food exactly, but the moment. Just you, the steppe, the slow crunch of dried bread, and the soft, sweet burst of apricot in a world that rarely offers sweetness. The night has thinned now, stretched so far it feels like it could tear. The stars, once so sharp and bright, have begun to fade, their edges softening into the slow, smoky gray of dawn. The horses shift in the half-light, tails swishing lazily, ears flicking at the early hum of the wind. The air feels different, lighter somehow, though the cold still lingers in your bones, a quiet ache that reminds you how long the night has been. And yet, you're still here. The fire is gone, nothing left but a faint, blackened ring in the dirt and a few scattered bits of ash. The riders stir slowly, blankets shrugged off, hands rubbed together against the chill. The world feels hushed, as if the steppe itself is holding its breath, waiting for the sun to break over the horizon. You glance around at the others, faces lined, eyes half-lidded with sleep, but still, there's a lightness to 'em, a quiet, unspoken sense of satisfaction, like they've made it through something together. And maybe they have. The horses are saddled, bags packed, and as you stretch your legs, you feel the stiffness settle into your joints like old friends, familiar, uninvited, but part of the journey. And then, before the riders mount up, there's one last ritual, a pause, a quiet, collective breath. The oldest rider, his beard streaked with gray, his eyes sharp but soft, reaches into his saddlebag and pulls out a tiny scrap of something. It's thin, brittle, almost paper-like. You squint, and then it clicks. It's a piece of dried meat. Not much, barely a bite. He breaks it in half, then in half again, and passes the pieces around. Each rider takes a fragment, no bigger than the tip of a finger, and holds it between their fingers like a charm. It's not about the food, not really. It's about the moment. A small, quiet reminder that even out here, in the middle of nowhere, with nothing but leather, bone, and stubbornness, you share. You pass it around. You don't hoard. You watch as they chew the dried meat slowly, faces turned toward the horizon, eyes tracing the faint blush of dawn as it spills over the edge of the steppe. A new day, another ride. The wind whispers low through the grass, and the world begins to stir, the quiet hum of life returning in slow, steady waves. You shift, pulling the blanket tighter around your shoulders, and feel the strange, stubborn warmth of it all. The meals, dried, salted, sometimes strange, sometimes barely enough. The laughter shared in the dark, the sharp tang of sweat and spice, the long, endless nights under stars so bright they make your chest ache. And as the first sliver of sun breaks over the edge of the world, you feel it, soft, almost imperceptible, like a sigh breathed out into the cold, a sense of completion. You made it through the night. And now, as the riders mount up, the horses' hooves stirring the dust, you let your breath slow, your mind settle, your body soften into the rhythm of the steppe. Just you, the grass, the fading scent of smoke, the taste of shared bread and laughter on your tongue, and the quiet promise of another day. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let the images drift away, gentle, soft, fading like embers in the dark. Let the sounds blur, the edges soften, the stories settle into your breath, your bones, your dreams. Just you, the night, the steppe, and the steady, endless rhythm of the world turning beneath you.